Hey, how are you?
Hashem, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, very good.
Going to
Hello.
Toronto are you going to
Uh,
Toronto in the near future?
yeah, in about a week, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Hyla goes to see her mom, so thank
Okay.
God. I
Hashem,
think
good.
yeah.
I'm going to be there next week, I think, also. You staying for Shabbos or what?
Yeah, I'll be there for Shabbos. Excuse me 1 minute. Take care of business here.
Hmm. Well, seems it's late.
Where are we, Mario?
All right. Oh, where we are? I
Yeah.
think it's
263.
263. I think.
That's where I got it marked. Okay.
Oh, Jorge.
Buenas noches. Vas a decir Chejejeyanu, pero no.
Mm. Sí, hace tiempo que no lo veíamos.
What
Yo
language
sé.
is that? French? Is that French?
No.
Yeah. No,
Good speak.
Italian.
We're good speaks.
Italian.
Maybe it was Hungarian. Yeah.
Maybe. You guys are confused. Ay.
Well, listen, I lived in Cleveland, and once I went to the bank, and this lady says to me, the cashier, how can it be Mario Horowitz? It's very easy. My mother is Italian. Oh, I see. So she didn't she didn't bother me anymore.
I tell you what, Mario, I beat you. My wife, because of the business, was traveling. So she is in one of the small towns in the back country of Texas. This is
Mhm.
about 25, 30 years ago. And they asked her, because she has a pretty strong Hungarian accent, where she was from. My wife says, I'm from Hungary. So the lady that she was talking to says, what part of the country is that from? And she says, you wouldn't know. It's from upstate New York. No problem. So, people are. So I
Not
feel
very
bad because
knowledgeable.
I think people don't know much about, and we
Hey,
don't
I thought it
teach
was in
anymore.
Connecticut.
We don't teach two things: history and geography. That's gone.
Mhm.
Funny, I didn't know it was in upstate New York. I thought it was in Connecticut.
You're better. You're getting closer. Ay vey. Ay, 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 ay. And it's funny, I keep up with the Daf Yomi. So the one that I do with you guys, with Ernie, is more for a comprehensive review. I like that, but
In this one here, we are probably at page 263, Jorge.
263, not 247.
No, I wrote it wrong. I wrote it reverse, I think.
See, I wanted you to
263.
know that I was reading what you sent me, Mario.
Very good. I wrote 237.
So
Actually, not-
Mincha is now a 7:35. So we might, just until the summer's over, we may have to start at 8:15. Just
I
to
think
cover
that's a
all.
good suggestion. I have the same issue.
Good
Yeah, I
suggestion.
start also at 7:35 here.
So let's make it 8:15 next week. Mario, I think we're gonna start Tfilas Mincha. We finished the Brachos Hariyah and the Birchas Hashvach. And now there's something that we deal with on a daily basis, Mincha and Ma'ariv. Last two shiurim turn our attention to the second and third tefillos, Mincha and Ma'ariv. The reason for this order is that the Shulchan Aruch places these halachos immediately following those of the various brachos that we have discussed over the last few shiurim. We learn in volume 11 that Chazal instituted the obligation to recite 3 tefillos in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Chaim, we're on page 263.
Thank you.
Even those opinions that hold tefillah constitutes a Torah obligation agree that the recitation of Mincha Ma'ariv is only rabbinic in nature, assuming one has already recited Shachris early in the day, meaning Minat Torah you have to daven once a day. So if you davened already Shachris in the morning, technically Mincha Ma'ariv is purely rabbinic. Despite the lengthier and possible superior level obligation of Shachris, Mincha recited, the superior level obligation of Shachris, Mincha recited in the middle of the day also has a unique quality. And it's described by the Gemara in Masechta Brachos. 6b. On Rav Chelba and Rav Huna. La'olam yei adam zor b'tfilas hamincha. Famous Chazal. Person should be very careful about mincha. Sharei Eliyahu lunana el ketfilas hamincha. Our Navi group learned this episode in detail. That Eliyahu Navi, when he was answered by Hashem against the Nevi'ei Baal at Hara Carmel, he was answered mincha time. Shneamar, vahi balosa mincha, vayigash Eliyahu Navi vayomer, aneni Hashem aneni, aneni sheteri deich min hashamayim, v'aneni shelo yomru ma'asek shafimein. Number one, that the fire should come down, because he did a test. He told the Nevi'ei Baal to put a cow, shecht it into pieces, and but not to put fire. And the Nevi'ei Baal, there were 400 Nevi'ei Baal. They davened and davened and davened. They were false Nevi'im, and nothing happened. So Eliyahu prepared his own mizbech. In fact, the Nevi'ei Baal destroyed the mizbech. There was a mizbech there. There's a debate who had built that original mizbech, but whatever. They figured by destroying it, he's not going to have a mizbech to use. So he rebuilt the mizbech, and then he surrounded the mizbech with water, and they poured water and more water on top of the animal that he prepared, and fire came in Hashemayim and consumed Eliyahu's Mizbech to show that. And then the people said, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. This is when the people were all worshiping the Baal. So this was again a revelation of Hashem, and Eliyahu was answered mincha, that he should be answered, that the fire should come, and that they would believe that it's not magic, but that it's actually min Hashemayim. So Kishuf, there was an aspect, like when we talk about the Khartoumim in Mitzrayim, that they used Kesem, Umri, and Kishuf. There is an aspect that they did magic. Not that it's real. They didn't have any power, but they did sleight of hand, right? One of the things we learn is that they put somebody in that Mizbeach who was going to pour water or whatever, meaning they did magic. They did magic acts to fool people, but people didn't know. Just like in Europe in the Middle Ages, there were wandering minstrels and magicians that, people felt that they had power, but they were just magicians. That's when magic started. The Tur explains that the special virtue of Mincha, due to which Eliyahu was answered, stems from the special challenge it presents, which we all can relate to. Shigizman filsa mincha yispala. The Tur quotes the Gemara. So the Tur is now busy explaining why should mincha be so special. So the morning davening, we know when its time is. Baboker, bakuma mimitoso. In the morning, when he wakes up, yispal miyad kodim shiyei Torah baska. He's got to daven right away before he gets busy with his business. V'chein shel erev balayla, ma'ariv zman yadua, b'va'ola beito, v'hu panui masakav. Person comes home, he's finished with work, he davens ma'ariv. Aval shemincha shehi be'emtza yom, ba'od shu Torah basaka. Mincha's in the middle of the day. Wall Street is open. Main Street is open. You have to separate yourself from your work. And if you make a practice to do it this way, you have great reward. What is the reason why this tefillah is called mincha? The word mincha usually refers to a meal offering that was offered in the Beis HaMikdash, which was made up of usually flour and oil. And a mincha could be a donative korban, like when you brought a shlomim. And you would bring the flour and the oil, you'd be magdish it in a kli. The kohen would do kmitza. He would go into the kli, take some of the flour, clean it off so that it would be nothing sticking out. And that kmitza would be put into another kli, and that kli would be thrown on the fire. That's analogous to when the kohen would shecht an animal and collect the blood in the kli and throw the blood on the. That's just like throwing of the blood of a korban shlomim allows the bailim, the owners of the korban, to eat the meat. So too, when the kohen threw the kmitza onto the fire, it allowed the bailim to eat the flour and oil. And you could cook it any way you wanted. Some were cooked like donuts. They were fried. They were baked. There were different types of mincha, machvas and marcheshes, and the Torah goes through different ways that the mincha could be prepared. That's a korban mincha. So what does that have to do with davening tefillas mincha? What does that have to do with each other? So remember, we've learned before that the tefillas were established keneged the korban atomid. There was a tomid shel shachar, a automatic korban that was brought every day. This is a korban tzibur. It's not brought by the individual. It's brought by the tzibur. It was usually a sheep, and this would be it was an olah. It was completely burnt. But along with that korban, they brought a minchas nesachim. They brought a flour and oil, which was also burned, and wine, which was poured on the mizbeach. The same thing was done, Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim. There was a korban offered in the afternoon as well, an animal, with minchas nesachim, a accompanying libation, which was a mincha, flour, and oil with the wine. So meal offerings, so you see clearly meal offerings are not brought just in the afternoon, they're brought in the morning. So we have to deal with the question, why is this tefillah in the afternoon called mincha? So Tosfos and Psachim offer two reasons. Tema, says Tosfos, Amai koile mincha. The imishum de mincha, haisa krevet bin arbaim, alogam b'shachar krevet minchas chavitin and minchas tamid. Right? The minchas chavitin was brought by the Kohen Gadol. He brought a mincha half in the morning, half in the afternoon. He didn't eat from it, it was kulo kolil. And this minchas tamid that was brought as a wine libation, see, look at the footnote. Minchas chavitin, a daily meal offering brought by the Kohen Gadol. Minchas tamid was a daily meal brought together with the korban tamid, like I explained, minchas nesachim. So Tosfos says, yesh shlomer b'shachar, yesh shem achar tefillah shachris. So there's another alternative name, shachris, which relates to the fact that it's being daven b'shachar, which is in the morning. V'od damina b'per kama de brachos, havizor b'tfilas mincha shafel yolu nane el b'tfilas mincha v'shema b'shas hakrevis mincha nane. Maybe he was answered at the time of when they would offer the mincha. V'lekach korelate tfilas mincha sha'az hayashor rotzo. It was a good time. Tosfos first suggests that while technically the morning prayer could also have been called mincha, the alternative shachris was preferred. There was no apparent appropriate alternative name for the afternoon prayer, so mincha was used. Tosfos adds a more fundamental reason why it's more appropriate. The name alludes to the afternoon prayer of Eliyahu, which was answered when a mincha offering was brought at a time of day with special divine favor. The Ramban, in his commentary on the Torah, explains the name mincha differently. Un mincha lason menuchas hashemesh, that the sun is setting, is resting. Bashket oruk agadol, and its strong light in the afternoon is waning. Kimetargim, like the uncle says, lemanach yuma. That means when the Targum explains the word mincha, he says manach yuma, the day is resting. Vein mincha gedolu mincha ketana shizkir chachamim. This refers to the two types of mincha. Chazal talk about mincha gedolu and mincha ketana. The terms mincha gedol, mincha ketana refer to the two sections in which the afternoon is divided by Chazal, and they'll be explained and discussed in more detail. What's the time for tfilas mincha? Page 266. Like all tfilos, mincha has an earliest and latest time, meaning there's a starting time. You can't daven mincha before such and such time. We have the same thing in Shachris, right? Well, we have it for Shema as well, but we also have it for Tefillah. When you want to do Tefillah Netzach. You certainly, remember we learned Shitas, you could do it even after Alos, according to most, but we cannot daven Shachris before Alos, according to any opinion. So that's a trigger. And then there is an end. You can't daven Shachris after the 4th hour of the day or the 5th hour of the day, according to the Shitas. Okay? So Mincha has the same thing. It has an earliest time that you can start davening Mincha, and it has a latest time. But unlike other tefillas, there are two times for Mincha. Mincha Gedola, Mincha Ketan. This is based on the times for the afternoon Korban Tamid, as the Rambam explains. Says the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, Kvar manu shetfilas mincha keneged tamid shel ben arbaim tiknu zman. The time of tfilas mincha was established at the time that the Korban Mincha, remember we said that there was a Tamid Shel Shachar, the Ola, the daily Ola that was brought in the morning, and then there was a daily Ola brought in the afternoon. So what is the time of the Tamid Shel Ben Arbai? Lefi Shaya Tamid Kar B'chol Yom. The Tamid was offered every day. When B'teisha Shosu Mechza, 9.5 hours after 9.5 hours a day. Now remember, let's talk about March 21 or September 21. That is the vernal or the autumnal equinox, when there are 12 hours in the day and 12 hours in the night. So remember, the winter solstice, December 21, is the shortest day. It's 10-hour day, 14-hour night. And then as we go from this December 21st to March 21st, the nights get shorter and shorter until it's equal, 12-12. Then from March 21 to June 21, you get the summer solstice. The day gets longer and longer until on June 21, you have the longest day. It's 14-hour day and 10-hour night. That's how the seasons work. So if we take, it's important to deal with the subject before we enter in the subject. We mentioned 9.5 hours because we're going to be dealing with this. 6.5 hours, 9.5. We need to understand this well. So if we take a day where it's 12 hours, day starts at 6 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m. So the 7th hour of the day is from 12 to 1. The 8th hour is from 1 to 2. The 9th hour is from 2 to 3. So 3:30 would be 9.5 hours. So mincha on that day, mincha gedola would be triggered, or the tamid would be offered by 9.5 hours. Tiknus mana metesha shosu mechza v'hiya nikras mincha ketana. So the later time, 9.5 hours, is called mincha ketana. Ulefish be'erva pesach shechalios be'erev Shabbos. Now, the craziest day of the year would be Erev Pesach if it fell on Friday, because you have many korbanos to do. There they advanced shechting the tamid to 12:30, 6.5 hours of the day, which is 12:30 p.m. So b'di'eved, if you daven mincha after 6.5 hours a day, because there was a day of the year, once a year, Erev Pesach, if Erev Pesach fell on an Erev Shabbos, where the time of the Tamid was 6.5 hours a day, because of that, technically, if you daven mincha after 6:30, meaning after 6.5 hours, which is 12:30, you would be Yotzei. Umishigizman zeigizman chiyuva. V'zuya nikras mincha gedola. You needed to leave time for the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach, which occurred after the Tamid, and to roast it before Shabbos. And yeah, footnote 5 goes into what I explained. So Mincha Gedola starts from 6.5 hours into the day. It's called Gedola because much more time remains until sunset. Mincha Ketana starts from 9.5 hours into the day, and it's called Ketana because little time remains until sunset. Although normally on a regular day, that's when they shechted the Korban Tamid at 3:30 in the afternoon. They didn't shecht it every day by Mincha Gedola. They shechted it on a normal day at the time of Mincha of 9.5 hours in the day, which is Mincha Ketana. The Rishonim disagree as to which of these time is the preferable time to daven Mincha. Mincha Ketana, Mincha Gedola. The Beis Yosef infers from the words of the Rambam quoted above that Mincha Ketana is preferable, but the Tur disagrees. Right? The Tur says Zman Mishneh Shosu Metzel Lamala. The Tur comes flat out and say that the best time to daven Mincha is at 12:30. Says Beis Yosef, right? Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, who at this time is acting as the main commentator on the Tur, says Midivrei Rabbeinu, from the words of the Tur, Nira, Dizman Mincha L'Chatchila B'Shei Shosu Mechza L'Mala V'Chei Nira M'Divrei Tshuva Sarosh. Because of Rabbeinu B'Simin She'echad Zeh She'achar Zeh Aval HaRambam Kosav the Perek Yigma Mechaz Tefillah Kvar Manu Shatfil Mincha Keneged Tamid Shabbein Arbaim Tiknu Zmana. The Tefillah of Mincha was established to be analogous to when you actually brought the Korban Atomid. And Zmana, its time was 9.5 hours. Tiknu Zmana Mitesha Shosu Mechza. So therefore, according to the Rambam, Mincha was established later to be the preferable time to daven it, which would be 3:30 on such a day. Now remember, if you take a winter day where it's 14-hour day and 10-hour day and 14-hour night, so the 10 hours have to be divided into 12. So a halachic hour at that time is like 50 minutes. So you just have to times 50, it's not 3:30, it'll probably be 2:30. Right? You have to shorten it, and vice versa. In the summertime, a halachic hour could be an hour and 10 minutes. So therefore, Mincha Gedola could be at 4:30, not 3:30. So these times move. That's why you always have to have your iPhone, or we used to have these little pocket, zmanim, to know day by day. And of course, it depends on where you live. If you're in the north or Sweden, as Susie says, or wherever you are, all of these hours are completely different. So, because they shechted on Erev Shabbos, Erev Pesach, on 6.5. So says the Beis Yosef that from the Rambam, and of course we know the Beis Yosef was very deferential to the Rambam. Most of the time he paskin like the Rambam, except if the Rosh and the Rif were against the Rambam. Sometimes we see the Beis Yosef not paskin like the Rambam, but usually he went with the Rambam for most halachas. So the Beis Yosef follows the Rambam that says that the best time for mincha is the later time, the mincha ketana time. Uzman mincha gdol shamru hainu lomar, uzman mincha gdol shamru hainu lomar shemispalad for the mincha b'shiyos shal yatzei dechavosel. He just wants to say that the mincha gdol, the earlier time, the 6:30 time, that if you daven mincha after that, you would be yotzei, but it's not the best time. The Shulchan Aruch rules, in accordance with the view of the Rambam, that mincha ketana is the main time. You're yotzei if you daven after mincha gedola, but ikar zman mitei shosu metzul lamala, which is known as mincha ketana. Let's look at footnote 8. It is usually assumed that the time for mincha gedola is calculation based on standard shozmanios, in accordance with the vast majority of the poskim. That's the way I explained. There's also the position of the Mishnah Brura in the Sharat Sion, although he raises another possibility there, that the time is 30 fixed minutes after halachic midday, which fluctuates during the year. It should be noted that Moshe Feinstein has a unique view regarding halachic midday, although he agreed with the consensus that halachic hours change based on sunset and sunrise. His position was that the time for midday does not change during the year. Rather, the first half of the day from sunrise until midday, and the second half of the day from midday until sunset are usually of different lengths, only being equal a few days of the year. Like we said, the equinoxes. Okay, not sure that's nafkamina yet. So, however, the Mishnah Brura notes that some Rishonim, such as the Tur, hold that it is permissible lechatchila to daven for mincha gedola, though not before that. The Mishnah Brura also writes that all opinions agree one may daven mincha earlier if he has a legitimate reason for doing so, a position maintained by contemporary poskim as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah. There are certainly Rishonim, we mentioned the tour, that allow the Chatchila to daven from 6.5. Let's say he needs to eat lunch. He has to go on a trip. Or it's easier to daven with a minyan. And if he waits for 9.5 hours, he's not going to have a minyan. So everyone, even l'chatchila, you'd be able to daven at 6.5 hours of the day. So for food, for travel, for business, if you think you won't get a minyan later, these are all reasons that l'chatchila you can daven at 6.5 hours. I know there are many people who work downtown, etc., that they have an easy minyan there at that time. They worry that maybe, and perhaps there is no minyan exactly at mincha ketana. It's only after mincha ketana. Excuse me. Yeah, it's after mincha ketana, after 9.5 hours a day. So they certainly have the Mishnah Berurah to rely on. Umechza l'mala yod, so that your yod say from 6.5 hours on. Mashma the mikodem l'chein lo yotza filu di'evet. But says the Mishnah Berurah, from there it seems you cannot daven before 6.5 hours. The yesh ma'achronim d'sfir lu. Da'af l'chatchila osur l'izpal kodem shenishlam achatzi shah shachar chatzos. Mikol mokem b'di'evet shitzpal b'zo achetzi shah lo yizpal shenis. That l'chatchila you shouldn't do it, but if you daven in that half hour, you shouldn't daven a second time. Today, many yeshivas daven mincha gedolah, which is 6:30, 6.5. Rav Avad Yosef explains that this practice is justified, even preferred. This is because, as we will see later on, some say that eating a meal is problematic before davening mincha. Mincha is therefore recited right before lunch during the mincha gedolah period. This can also help to maintain a yeshiva's logical daily schedule. Says the Yichad Das, which is Rav Avadia Yosef, L'ficha choel v'das harif Ramba, ein lechol sudas atzarayim lifnei tefillas mincha. The Rambam and the Rif hold you shouldn't eat before you daven mincha. Gzeresh shami yimashach b'sudaso. You're going to get so caught up with your suda, you'll forget to daven mincha. V'chein posuk moran b'shulchan aruch. The Shulchan Aruch himself paskin that way. Even though there were achronim that were lenient and said you could eat lunch before mincha, and and they have reasons to be lenient. He feels it's better to daven mincha before lunch, to basically fill out, to agree with the Rif and the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. V'chein kosav b'shut shol v'nishal. V'lachein minag b'nei yeshivos b'zei yisodas yidasatzor b'arei kodesh v'chein roi linhog. This
Rosh Hashanah, at Rosh Hashanah to this day, mincha is every day at 1:30. That's the way it's always been, in the beginning. Shiva was alive, so that's what they died.
And that may, by the way, notice 1:30 is a fixed time. May have to do with this shita that he had about halachic midday, that it didn't change.
Yeah, it could be. Also, it's the latest. At 1:30, you're always past Mincha Ketana, no matter what time of the year.
I see. Kolel. Saul said
in case
the Kolel in Los Angeles, he says, is at 1:35.
1:35, something like that.
Yes, Walter?
in case you want to come downtown, we always have a mincha at 1:30 as well. In the
Nice. Just like the Rav Moshe. Wow.
That's right. We started it.
Where is that mincha minyan, Walter?
We're in the old City National Bank. It's actually in the City National Bank building, but they gave us the bank because they didn't rent it, so they gave it to us. We use it for a base medrash for mincha.
Where is that?
606 South Olive Street in my building.
And how many people do you get? How many people do you get usually?
Sometimes you get 15 to 20, sometimes you get 12, 15. It depends, sometimes 20.
Okay, that's nice.
A
And
lot of
these are what other jewelry people or shmata people?
very lawyers,
Huh?
people who know about the minyan come.
Okay. No, I mean there was a time where the shmata business was big there, and
No, no, there's a couple of minyanim downtown. I mean, this is not the only minyan. There's a couple of minyanim downtown.
I see. I've davened. There is an afternoon minyan by Steve Uretsky's factory. During my Avelis year, I happened to have used that minyan a few times when I knew I couldn't go to the later minyan. That gets a big crowd. It gets 20, 30 people because there's a lot of people who work in that industry area, City of Commerce, Vernon, and they gather there for afternoon as well. Okay. Nice to know that people are fulfilling this chumrah. What about the latest time? There's a classic machlokas here. The dispute between Rav Yehuda and the Chachamim determining the latest time that one can recite mincha is one of the most important and practical questions that arises within this topic. The Tanoim in the Mishnah Masechta Brachos disagree about the latest time that one may recite mincha. This is in Brachos Dalid Amud Aleph. Tfilas HaMincha ad ha'erev, which usually means shkia, right? Because Laila means tseis, right? If the period of time between shkia and tseis HaKochavim is bein hashmashos. So usually the understanding of the word erev is when the sun sets. Rabbi Yehuda oimer ad plaga mincha. So he says that it's the midpoint from when you can begin to sacrifice the korban atomim, which we said was 9.5 hours of the day, and when you cannot do it anymore, which is shkia. So that's, let's see, 10.5, 11.5, that's 2.5 hours, but you have to divide it in two. So it's 1 hour and 15 minutes beyond 9:30, right? 9.5 plus 1 hour is 10.5, right? So that's the plug is half of the time between 9.5 and that 12 hour, right? So that's 2.5 divided by 2.
10 3/4.
Okay. So according to Tanakh, one may recite mincha till evening. Now, the definition of which will be discussed shortly. According to Rav Yehuda, you can only recite it until plag, which is the midpoint between the start of the mincha ketana period until evening, which is this 2.5 halachic hours we just discussed. The Gemara doesn't rule definitively as to which view is the accepted halacha. Rather, permits a person to choose which opinion to follow. It's very important. You cannot choose the leniency of one, the leniency of the other. You have to hold either like the Chachamim, or you have to hold like Rav Yehuda. You can't hold like both. That's what's going to come out. What does it say in the Gemara of Masechta Brachos Chavav? Hashta delo itmar ilchos lo kamar v'lo kamar. No beraisa or no halacha was stated, either like the Chachamim or like Rav Yehuda. So the Ovid Kamar Ava, the Ovid Kamar Ava. Those that follow the Chachamim is fine. Those that follow Rav Yehuda is fine. So let's just define what that means. According to Rav Yehuda, you would have a very small period to which daven mincha. Lechatchila, according to those that say 9.5, until only 1 hour and 3/4 later. And according to the Chachamim, you'd have a longer period, from the time of 9.5 until Shkia. May one change his practice on a regular basis? Or must one maintain the same practice continuously? According to the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, although the Gemara does not give a definitive ruling, each person must choose one view that one always follows. Therefore, since the common practice is to recite mincha close to sunset, one should not ever recite Ma'ariv earlier than that. Says the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah. You cannot have two different customs, which are going to be conflicting against each other. If Rabbi Yehuda held you can only start davening by plag mincha. So if sometimes a person will daven mincha by plag, Shim yispal mincha lepamim miplag mincha ve'elech and kirabanan ulefamim yispal arvis ba'osazman kodim shkia zachama, and other times daven ma'ariv prior to shkia Rav Yehuda, because we're going to see according to Rav Yehuda, since you can daven mincha after plag, you can even daven ma'ariv prior to shkia. So nimtzu dvar soisrim zed zeh shapamim dan oso yom upamim dan oso laila. Eliyasa kol shog kamo rabbanon. You have to do it all the time, like chachamim sheyispal mincha ad shkia sachama. According to chachamim, there's a drop dead time. You cannot daven mincha after shkia. Utfilas arvis achar kach, and then you can daven ma'ariv after shkia. O kumar Yehuda, sheyispal tfilas mincha lo olam ad plag mincha. When you should always stop. The latest time you should daven mincha's plag. These palavis are, and if you can daven ma'ariv after plag, even before shkia. He says, Rabbeinu Yonah lived in Barcelona or close there, Girona, in around 1300, about the time of the Ramban. We were there. Achshav kevin shemenagenu. Most shuls have a custom that they daven mincha after plag. Now I understand the minyanim in the downtown are davening after mincha gedola, but we're talking about minyanim in shul. They're davening after plag. Remember, if talking about that day where it's 3:30 versus 6 o'clock, so you're talking about 5:10 would be plag, or 4:50, something like that would be plag. People that mincha is usually called right before shkia, 10-15 minutes before shkia is when most shuls daven. That's what he's saying. Even in the time of Rabbeinu Yonah, that's why we're always makpid not to say Baruch Hu until after shkia. We're always looking at our watches because you got to wait until, since you can't do both. You can only daven ma'ariv before shkia if you stop davening mincha prior to plag. But obviously we're davening mincha after plag. So we're holding like the chachamim. And therefore we've got to wait for shkia and to daven ma'ariv. Ein lanu ispal tefillah service kodim shkia zacham Rav Yehuda elo lasos hakol k'rabbanon. Says the Rabbeinu Yonah, miyu b'di'evet im ispal tefillah service kavana lotzeis miplaga mincha ve'ele. If you had in mind, I'm davening ma'ariv, I know it's after plag, I'm going after Yehuda, yotza. That this is what Rabbeinu Yonah says. This is not how we codify the halacha, but that's the notion that he advanced. The Beis Yosef writes that the common practice is not to be particular about this, and he explains the basis for this. The general minhag is to be lenient regarding all of this. He says, even though people are davening after plag, which is not according to Rabbi Yehuda, they daven ma'ariv even before shkia. Right after they finish mincha, they go right into ma'ariv, even though it's before shkia. So l'chora, they're being soiser. They're holding both like Rabbi Yehuda and like the chachamim. They're holding like Rabbi Yehuda regarding mincha, but they're not holding Rabbi Yehuda regarding ma'ariv, that they're davening before shkia, but they didn't follow Rabbi Yehuda because they davened their mincha after plag. it seems like we're having a conflict. Maybe those communities that are doing it that way are relying on the Rosh, L'das Rabbeinu Tam, V'zel Shono, Mi'uktzas Kosher, the Le'inyan Tfilas HaMincha, Avdin and Karabonon, right? Regarding Mincha, we daven after Plag, like the Chachamim, U'mispali Pamim Tfilas HaMincha Achar Plag HaMincha. However, Le'inyan Kriya Shema Chashvin Le'layla. But regarding davening Ma'ariv, Kriya Shema within Ma'ariv, they're considering Lila to be like Rabbi Yehuda, which is prior to Shkia. Rabbi Trey called it the Sasson Adadi. Come on. Even though the Gemara said, Ovid Kamar Ovad, Achi Perusho, Lo Ifsika Hilchasa, Lo Krab Yudav, Lo Krabbono. The way the Beis Yosef is explaining is the Gemara didn't pass him like either. Mishiyirtza Yasar Kol Krab Yehuda, O Kol Krabbonon, Velo Shiyitfas Kula Shel Shneim. They shouldn't take the leniency of both. However, Yesh Loimar de Le'inyan Tefillah Hekilu. Maybe by Tefillah they were makel. V'chein kosav gam ken Rashba. We know the Rashba is a kingmaker. The Rashba had that kind of power. When the Rashba, Yaakov was with me on the trip to Spain when Mark Shapiro went through all the various shittas of the Rashba. Yeah, we like here in the Rashba, like here in the Rashba, the here in the Rashba, the OU. The Rashba is a major rishon that they usually don't go. They don't. So if the Rashba said that you could be makel, says the Beis Yosef, that's probably why Noagu ha'olam lakel b'kach. V'afu b'shelo niru div Rabbeinu Tam la'arosh. The Rosh didn't accept what Rabbeinu Tam said. Uvesad var v'masha kaz of Rabbeinu Hai, that the Rosh said that Rabbeinu Haigon should totally spalal matzibur tfilas arvis mi plaga mincha krab Yehuda, that it's good to daven Ma'ariv after plug, even before Shkia, mimashi yispal b'yichud, rather than daven Ma'ariv by yourself, yismok ulu l'tfila kosav, miu near the hanoy came circling zorsh yispal tfilas mincha mi plaga mincha lamala. If you're going to daven Ma'ariv prior to Shkia, make sure you daven your mincha before plug. Keep it the chashav le'layla and yin fil se'erev. If it's going to be considered Laila, you can't have mincha that Laila. But the Beis Yosef ends up saying they're makel like Rabbeinu Tam, who said you could have your cake and eat it too. Basically, you could use the kulas of both shitas. So the question will be now, where does the Shulchan Aruch go? Does he follow the Rabbeinu Yonah, or does he follow? Well, the Beis Yosef is the Beis Yosef, but let's see how he codified it. Rabbeinu Tam holds, that since Tefillah is rabbinic, Chazal were lenient to allow following Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim at the same time. The Beis Yosef explains that although the Rosh disagrees, the widespread custom was to rely on Rabbeinu Tam. The Shulchan Aruch and Ramah rule in accordance with the opinion of the Talmid Rabbeinu Yonah, that you should always follow the same practice. You shouldn't use the kulas of both, though they disagree in which opinion they follow. The Shulchan Aruch writes that it's customary to follow Chachamim, and you should be able to recite Mincha till Shkia, while the Ramah writes that in his locale, it was customary to follow Rabbi Yehuda and recite Ma'ariv as long as after Plag you were okay. But they both add a provision for leniency in times of need. Says the Shulchan Aruch, he says Mincha should be done 9.5 hours, and it should stop until Shkia. Rabbi Yehuda ad plaga Mincha. Rabbi Yehuda, you have to stop by Plag Mincha. Shuad Sof Yud Aleph Shos Chaser Revia. Right, 11 hours and 45 minutes after the 6 o'clock in the morning. Says the Ramah.
10 hours.
Say again?
10 hours and 45 minutes.
10 and 45. 10 and 45 after 6 a.m., which is going to be like 4:45 on that special day. inyan ayom. He's telling us has to be halachic zmaniyos. That means divide 14 by 12 or divide 10 by 12 in summer and winter. Ve'avi mayom aruch. B'sharin liyud beishos. Benikra shmana zonios. The Ramah is telling us, do this calculation that if it's 14 hours, you need to divide by 12. Anytime Chacham give you hours of the day, it's like Erev Pesach. It's the 4th hour of the day, the 5th hour of the day. It's always halachas manios. The Ramah is telling you. Shulchan Aruch Vasikna. What's the conclusion? The Ovid Kamar Ovid, Udavid Kamar Ovid. Vushi Yasalom Chad Minai. Shulchan Aruch Paskins like Rabbeinu Yonah that you should choose one and follow that person. That if you're going to use the heter to daven mincha all the way until shkia, then the trigger for your ma'ariv cannot be plugged. The trigger for your ma'ariv has to be shkia. Can't have it both ways. However, if you allow yourself to daven ma'ariv after plug, you have to daven mincha prior to plug. The Akshav Shenogel is followed Filas Mincha Alay. Shulchan Aruch in his time, you're talking about 1480, something like that in Tzvat. He says the practice was to daven mincha like the Chachamim until Shkia. Ein lispalot Filas Arvis Kodim Shkia Sachamim. You shouldn't daven Ma'ariv prior to Shkia. Vim b'di'eved is palot Filas Arvis Miplaka Mincha Mala. Let's say you did it, Yotza. V'shasat chak. If it's emergency, yachol ispal tefillah service like a mincha l'mala. You can do it. Ulididan b'minas elu. The Ramah lived in Krakow, so he says in Central Europe. Shenagim lispalo arvis miplaga mincha. There. So remember, the Shulchan Aruch lived in Israel, in Akko, in Tzfat. So it's closer to the equator. They didn't have, but in Europe, Poland. Northern, so they wanted, people had to go home. So if they could daven ma'ariv after plug, it was easier for them, right? Then their mincha was always done prior to plug. So basically, you get credit. I'd say so. Then. Hang on, let's see what he said here in the end. Yatsa im ispalo mincha ad alayla, dahainu ad seisa koichavim. So the Ramah is saying something big here. Up until now, we understood that the final time for mincha was shkia. Now he says, even if you daven mincha after shkia, all the way to tseis. Remember, there's a 45-minute period between Shkia and Seis and Laila. But says that's what the Ramah says. And you could, he says, you daven mincha after Shkia and daven Ma'ariv after Shkia. Like daven Ma'ariv to the middle of the night. But the Ramah ends up with a huge leniency here that your mincha could extend even after Shkia. Let's see whether that holds or not. According to both the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah, it is permitted in case of need to follow the two contradictory opinions of reciting mincha after plag and then reciting ma'ariv before nighttime, known as Tarta de Satri. The Mishnah Berurah explains that according to the leniency, one who normally follows one of the approaches may follow the other approach on a one-time basis, but one may not follow both approaches on the same day and daven both mincha and ma'ariv after plag and before nightfall. Nevertheless, the Mishnah Berurah writes, in a time we're waiting for nightfall to daven ma'ariv would make it difficult to maintain the minyan. It's permitted to follow the Tarta de Satri and daven both mincha and ma'ariv after plag and before nightfall, before shkia. V'shasat chag. Rotzalomer da'af im darko tomi l'spal mincha achar plag. Let's say this person always daven mincha all the way up to shkia. Mikol mokum yochel l'spal tfiras gam came bizman hazeh. U'mikol mokum ein lakel b'zeh rakim al kol ponim ba'osu hayom hispal mincha kodim plag. you should only daven Ma'ariv prior to Shkia if on that day you daven Mincha before Plag. You can't have it both ways on the same day. If you daven Mincha that day after Plag, Shuv Osir Lo Lispal Arvis Kodem Alei. Then you got to wait to Shkia. Achronim discuss whether the halacha may differ on Friday night if one accepts Shabbos early and wishes to recite Marv before sunset, since perhaps already considered night with regarding to Marv as well. That will be discussed in volume 16. By the way, I'm reminding everybody I have volume 16 and volume 17. I gave them to Chaim tonight at Mincha, so just either let me know and I'll bring them somewhere, or I'll have Jake, my son-in-law, I'll have to give him for Norm and for Sai and for Yaakov and the Valley people. So let's, because we're going to be finished probably in a couple weeks. Got Mincha and Ma'ariv to go. Cholzeh mispal yechidi. About tzibur shespalo mincha. This is for us. If you have a tzibur that daven mincha, sheyelch lebeitam yetorch lekaptzim shenis l'tfila. This group daven mincha after Plag. So the question is, can this tzibur daven Ma'ariv before Shkia? Yes, a kilo achronim shemutr tzpalav v'samech lemincha. You can do it right after you daven mincha, even though it's both after Shkia. As a yachid, you shouldn't do it.
This is actually also necessitated by the reality that, it got dark and nobody went out after dark. There were no street lights and it was very dangerous. So, you had to get the people together for a minyan, but it had to be in a time after Plag, but before night, because at night it was unsafe to go out.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you can see the Ramah, because he lived more north, was very sensitive to that. Ashkenazim today generally follow the rulings of the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah, as the Yisha Yisrael writes. Thus, one should not conduct oneself with Tartat and Satra on the same day, unless one is davening with the minyan that will otherwise be canceled entirely. The question of whether one may begin Ma'ariv after Shkia or only after nightfall, if one is following the opinion of the Chachamim, will be discussed further in the next year regarding Ma'ariv. So we're not through yet. And the Isha Yisrael is a terrific sefer on all of Tefillah, with very good Mekorot, including recent Mekorot like Rosh Hashanah Zalman and Rav Vosner, and so that's we used to learn that sefer with Rabbi Krause at Young Israel Bangkok Park between Mincha and Ma'ariv during Sfira time, where he's makpid to say Sfira only after Tseis. So there was a period of time where we learned this sefer Isha Yisrael, and that I highly recommend that sefer. I'm going to stop here, even though we're in the middle of the sugya, because I think we'll summarize. We'll go over some of what we said next week. We're still not through with this about evening and Laila and Erev. So it's again, anybody comments or arrows? Any other business they want to discuss?
Here, just an interesting aside. Those who remember the riots in LA, was it like 20 years ago, whatever, I can't remember. 30 years.
Longer than 20 years ago.
30 years ago.
94. Yeah.
30.
So at that time, I remember that there was a curfew for all residents of Los Angeles at nightfall, and we ended up going to Shul, and we davened in Minyan, we davened Ma'ariv before Shkia.
Because of this Shas Atchak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't there also a curfew for a short time during COVID? I seem to remember that was the case. And we also had to do that. I mean, when we were davening together.
When we had the riots, I don't remember.
Yeah. Whatever.
Okay. Well, at least we saw the Mekorot directly. This is a very known machlokas, a known sugya, but not everybody goes through this in detail. It's very valuable, I think, to have our finger on this pulse. Okay.
Okay.